You turn it this way? No, I turn it all now. But it will take a little minute before. Try punching it.
Yeah.
Here we go. So then just put this in your back pocket.
It's good. Fine.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Hi. First of all, thank you to the organization, and thank you to Lars to invite me to speak in the North Festival of Mediterranean beers. Mediterranean is so far from here. Maybe 7 hours to arrive here by planes, buses, and different ways of transport. But as you will see in the history of beer, is the key. Middle East and Mediterranean will be the key to understand how beer and beer fermentation arrived all along Europe. So, what we'll deal in this speech, we'll travel around this. Do we have Mediterranean beers, historical Mediterranean beers? Yes, I will answer after, but yes. From when we ferment beer, we can consider that we ferment beer as humanity. We will talk avant la lettre. That means in French, avant, before. Are there beers or alcoholic fermentations of grain before the first beer we have? That it's a beer that has about 30,000 years old. There are some archaeology very interesting in this sense. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about the Mediterranean basin, the implantation of agriculture, the arrival of the agriculture in the Mediterranean basin. This arrival implies the arrival of beer. I announce this to you. And we'll talk about my country, about Catalonia. Catalonia is a country nowadays inside Spain. We are not lucky on this sense. But we have the oldest beer in Europe. So it's curious, it's really curious. One of the maybe most interesting things is talking about genetics. I won't talk so much, but we have 2 or 3 papers and projects this year that links Near East populations, genetical population that have a genetical link with the Near East, with the arrival of beer to Western Europe. So these are new informations that I will offer you also in the speech. We'll talk about the Iberian Peninsula, and at the end we will talk about Greece. Greece, but not the classical Greeks. And trying to offer a vision of this long travel of beer from Middle East to Western Europe, following this Mediterranean trail. So, first question I have answered before. Do ancient Mediterranean beer exist? Mediterranean is known for the wine, basically. But the answer is yes. And these beers have long tradition than wine. We have beers from 4,300 BC until the arrival of the Romans. When the Romans arrived, finished. They implant vineyard economics and all finished. until, in my country, the 19th century. We have no beers from 200 BC to 19th century. Only wine and spirits. But that's important. The most ancient beer has been found in the Mount Carmel area near Haifa in North Israel. And it's 11,000 before Christ. So it's a beer that today is about 13,000 years old. And it's related to a tomb. This is important because the first beers we know are in sacred spaces. In this case, is a funerary cave, Rakefet cave, where you will see after appear this funerary beer. Okay, we'll speak after about this beer. And the oldest is close to Barcelona. It's a similar context, a Neolithic funerary cave, where there is a burial with a vase that contained beer. 4,300 before Christ. Okay. These are what archaeology says, but we have all this data, all this record about alcoholic fermentation of grains. Well, in any case, they don't wake up one day in the morning in northern Israel telling, well, we'll ferment grain and we'll do a beer. And it's a malted beer, this beer of Israel. So the process to arrive to the knowledge and the technology to ferment, to brew beer is longer. Maybe millennia longer. Okay, so we begin to have some reports about transformation of grains and transformation of grass and of other kind of vegetables from maybe 105,000 before present, like in this site in Mozambique, in southern Africa, southeastern Africa, where there are people, sapiens like us, that are beginning to grind and to transform grains like sorghum, grasses and vegetables like, for example, African potato, that are supercharged in starches. This is suspicious. At the end, why are they trying to transform, to grind in stones this kind or this level of germinated grasses and grains? Why? Well, one option is surely, truly, the alcoholical transformation, fermentation. It is not an only site with this kind of work. All along the last 100,000 years, all along the north and the south coast of the Mediterranean, we have sites that are doing this work also, where we find this kind of grinding stones or lithic elements to cut the cereals that are the grain, that are grains and plants completely ultra charged of starches. Okay, for example, in Italy, Grotta Paglici is in a grotta in the south of Italy, in a cave in the south of Italy, where they found these grinding stones with wild oat, starches of wild oat. But there are a lot of other sites, like another one in Italy, Bilancino, 30,000, excuse me, before present, where we have another grinding stone with Rhizomas ovanea. It is a water plant, also with a strong charge of starches. But maybe the most pre-beer site most interesting is this one, that it's another site in Israel, that is in the north, in the Galilee Lake, that is called Ohalo 2 in Tiberias. Why is known this site? This site is known for two things, basically two things. There are the oldest, or one of the oldest houses in humanity. It's the beginning of the building of the huts and after beginning of the houses. You will see after, and is known also because there are 90,000 grains and seeds preserved in a very small site. The site is only 2,000 square meters, so it's a very small site, and there have been preserved about 90,000 grains and seeds. Why these grains have been preserved? Because this site that is close to the Lake of Galilee, the Lake of Galilee is a post-glacial lake, was a place that was very attractive for hunters and gatherers. And they arrived there and they established there. This it's a site that lasts maybe 1,000 years, and after it's burned, completely burned. This site is completely burned, and the lake grew. The level of the water grew, and this preserved this enormous, this huge quantity of grains. It's not normal. When we dig, we don't find grains, or we don't find normally seeds. It needs to be burned to be preserved. So what indicates this kind of the most significant species that are preserved in Ohalo 2 are, for example, bromus or wild barley also. It seems to indicate that people who inhabit this site, they still were hunters and gatherers. They are not peasant. It is still at least 10,000 years to the uprising of the rising of the agriculture in the Middle East, were people that knew the cycle, the living cycle of the cereals, of the grain, of the plants, and they used this to harvest and to transform. So Dani Nadel, that is the archaeologist who have digged this site, talks about proto-agriculture, or pre-agriculture, 10,000 years before agriculture in this site. Are they only eating this grain? No, we think that they are transforming also the grain. And maybe in this kind of sites is where people began to think on beer, really began to think on beer, and began to maybe understand the process of malting and that appear after in the first beer. But it's this site is very complicated to dig because it's under the water of the Kinneret, of the Galilean Sea, and we have to wait until there is a dry moment. And this happens every 20 years or something like this, so it's only excavated in the minimum phase. These are the huts. You can excuse me, the first huts of humanity. And this is what you find: this kind of grinding stones, big grinding stones, where they are transforming ancient wets, Triticum dioscoides, ancient wets, discocoides, ancient barley or Demus spontaneum, but also Vitis sylvestris, another kind of fruits. We have blackberries, a lot of blackberries. These blackberries are dried. They dried these blackberries, but why? To transform to another kind of food or beverage or something. Blackberries are very delicate, so are not thought for transportation, are thought for consumption. They dry for their consumption. But finally, beer arrived. 100,000 years experiments, and finally beer arrived. And is in the site I have explained you before. Rakefet cave, that it's the slopes of the Mount Carmel, north of Israel. Is a Natufian funeral cave. The Natufians are still are not agriculture. They are hunters and gatherers. And they use this cave to bury dead people. There are more than 100 tombs inside this cave. It was excavated also by Danny Nadel, that's the same from Ohalo. And what they found was in the door of the cave, the entrance of the cave, mortars. Two kind of mortars. Mortars excavated in the limestone, in the rock, or mobile mortars, like this that you can see there. Okay. When they analyzed what were inside these mortars, there's wastings that have been preserved inside the mortars, they found malts, malted cereal, two kind of cereals, barley and wheat. All wheats and all barley, of course, all barley, of course. But also they found some kind of vegetables like flax and other grains like oats and some legumes. This has been interpreted as a beer, as an alcoholic fermentation, because you use malts mixed with other vegetables, and you have ferment this because you have calcium oxalate. You have this kind of indications that you are working with a beer. Don't you think that it's a beer in our sense of beer, nor in the sense of Cornol? It's like a porridge. Okay, so we are between a bread and a beer. Thinking about yes, an alcoholic bread or something like this. Why they do brew this? There, it's a beer for the feasting, for the feast. When you have a funeral, you celebrate a feast where people eat and people mainly drink. We have a lot of examples, archaeological, historical, of the consumption of alcohol for weddings, funerals, and like today. Okay, so we think, or the archaeologists that have researched this cave, they think that these celebrations were when people die, they make the beer, and then maybe in 1 or 2 days they have a feast. Okay, this is the most ancient beer of the world by now. We have other beers in the Middle East. Maybe the most known is about, in a chronology of about now 9,000 BC, is the beers of the region of Göbekli Tepe. Do you know Göbekli Tepe? Have you heard about Göbekli Tepe? Yes? Göbekli Tepe, another Urfa region in South Turkey and Southeast Turkey, will change the vision we have about Neolithization and the apparition of the agriculture and all of this, and the models of society mortuary sanctuaries like this of the 9,000 BC, with sculptures, with a lot of
structures that since now archaeologists didn't thought that Neolithic communities could do, or the early Neolithic communities could do. And they have beer. They have these stone big vessels with traces of oxalate, of calcium oxalate. That is the beginning to understand what they have beer. We have to, or they have to research more. Calcium oxalate only indicates some kind of fermentation, not only beer. So they have to work more. At the end, we have beer in the Middle East. We have the apparition of the agriculture in the Middle East, how agriculture and how beer arrived to Western Europe. Well, three ways. Three trails. The Mediterranean Trail from Anatolia through Cyprus, southern Anatolia, Greece, the Dalmatian coast, southern Italy and the Iberian Peninsula. There arrived agriculture by this path. You have another path that is the Balkan Trail through the Straits of the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, moving towards Central Europe and the Danube basin towards here, towards Northern Europe. This is a long process of millennia. It's not 2 days. And the third is the Black Sea to the Dnieper and the Volga regions. But how this Neolithic, this agriculture came from the east to the west and to the north of Europe? There are several theories, all based in this first theory is the Neolithic wave of advance of two scientifics, Ammerman and Cavalli-Sforza, basically defends that from the Middle East, the communities, when they grew, they displaced on a media of 30 kilometers and found another community. And this have led to about the displacement of the Neolithic, like if you throw a stone in the water, in waves. In 3 or 4 and 4, I mean, about 4,000 years from the Middle East to the north of Europe and to the east of west of Europe. Okay, this is the first theory that implies diffusionism and conquest or reoccupation of lands. There's a second theory that it's the most defended today, that talks that the agriculture moved also this way, but these people enter in contact with the local communities, and then there was a fusion. That is the theory of this dual model of agricultural frontier, and the percolation model that talks about a model that there is no contact with the Middle East. Neolithic appears because the communities of late prehistory have grown enough to be agriculture at the end. Okay, it's maybe the most interesting is in the middle, but the fact is that from the east it runs to the west. We don't have in these chronologies here in Spain barley, so barley have to come from somewhere, and this is one of the explanations they have. These explanations that are genetically based, the Ammerman and Cavalli-Sforza used genetical studies of nowadays population, have some archaeological reports to defend this kind of theories. For example, the moving of the Neolithic and the agriculture in this way gives a kind of pottery market that is a cardial pottery that is decorated with a shell. And he found the same vases in the Middle East than in the Iberian Peninsula. But the second trail, this trail of the Balkans to the north of Europe, gives another kind of pottery and another kind of decoration that is the linear band ceramic that is completely different to the ceramics, Neolithic ceramics of the south of Europe. So archaeology at the end reflects these two ways of arrival of the agriculture from the east to the west and to the north. We have to focus on beer. We have talked of ancient beer, of agriculture. How we see today these ways of arrival of beer? Well, we see these groups to try to explain from the oldest beer to maybe to 1000 BC how beer was implanted with agriculture in Western and Northern Europe. By now, the oldest trace of beer is this site in Stuttgart that is known from the 30s of the last century, but that is impossible to distinguish if we have bread or we have beer. So by now it's discarded. It's an old data and it's discarded. And the oldest beers is this group 1 from 5000 to 4000 before Christian era, and are beers from Catalonia, Cova de Can Sadurní, I will talk now, and we have also in Ovčarovo in Bulgaria some similar beers, but not so old like this one in Catalonia. A second group that is where we can see how from the Middle East by the Balkans the trail of the beer goes to the Central Europe and after to the north, is this, with sites dated between 3900 to 3000 in Central Europe, like Sipplingen or the sides of the Constance Lake in Switzerland. And in England, there's another third group from 3000 to 2000. That's when beer arrived to Scandinavia. We have sites in Denmark, sites in Sweden, not by now in Norway, but it's a matter of research, I think. And after, during the Bronze Age, there are beer along Europe. These are the 4 ways, the 4 groups. These are sites along Europe where you can find beer, mead, malt, or some kind of beer mixed with malt. Okay. Spain and Portugal. Look, the quantity of sites. We have a lot of data, and we have voids. Nothing. Almost nothing. Nothing or almost nothing in the Balkans. Why? We are more handsome than the Italian or not? It's research. In Spain, if we have the possibility, we apply analytics always, not in other countries. But as you will see, the Neolithic and the arrival of agriculture in Spain is well linked to Middle East population. So maybe we have more archaeological records because we make more analytics than other spaces. The Balkans is dramatic, but there's a history of wars that have that doesn't allow to work with it during a long year. But in Spain, maybe this relation of Neolithic populations of Middle East with Neolithic populations of the Iberian Peninsula marks the presence of more beer and more fermented transformations, alcoholic fermented transformations than in other countries. This is the oldest. This is close to my home, 4300 BC. Can Sadurní cave, a Neolithic burial cave, where they found this. A Neolithic burial with a vase that contained beer. Malted beer, barley, wet, and with raspberries, and I don't remember another herb. Okay. By now the oldest. We'll see what happens with research. But by now, Can Sadurní is the oldest. So, as a summary, we have the oldest in the world in Israel. I have the oldest of Europe here. Okay, but as you can see, as you've seen before, from the 3rd millennia, we have spread of beer all around. At least all the central and north of Europe. And here is the genetics. We have 2 works, one really recent, that is this paper from the August of this year, this paper from Wang, that they have analyzed the genetics of the Otzi mummy. You know who is Otzi? Otzi was a man from the early Bronze Age, late Neolithic, early Bronze Age, that get frozen in the Alps and was discovered 20 or 30 years ago. His genetic link this man, that is about 3,300 BC, so 1,000 years more modern than the beer of Can Sadurní, links to population of Sardinia and populations of the Middle East. It's not a Central European population. Okay? Genetic, this means that 1 or 2 millennia before, he had an elder, antepasat, I don't know in English, who was connected with the Middle East, okay? And this man here, that had the beer 1,000 years before, is also connected genetically with the Middle East. So we have to cover these voids with genetical analysis to link if it's true that these ancient beers in the western of Europe are related to people that at least have a connection, a genetical connection with the Middle East, but because it's very important to understand if with the livestock and with the agriculture comes the beer, the concept of the beer, okay, or not. That's important. If we go on time and we enter in the 3rd millennium in Western Europe, the spread of beer is everywhere. In the western part of Europe, we have from Scotland to Spain, the bell bakers culture, culture of the bell bakers. That, well, it's an archaeological culture. It's not an homogeneous culture, but they use a kind of bases that have been interpreted to drink, that are these bases you have here, or this kind of bases, that are similar from Scotland to Spain. What defend the archaeologists is that these vases that appear almost always in ritual context or in tombs are dedicated to drunk alcohol. And we have some sites that give us information about this. For example, if we return to Spain and we look at the map of the bell bakers culture that have been analyzed today, we found that all the green and all the yellow dots are sites with beer or with mead or with beer or mead between 3,000 and 2,000. Analyzed by today, we will have more. And always are in a tumulus or in a dolmen or in some kind of megalithic tomb or a cyst or a site like this with a religious context. I put only 4 of these analytics for you to give an idea of what we are working. For example, the site of Loma la Tejeria, it's a mining camp inside Spain, in the inner lands. From 2622, they have analyzed the vase that have oxalate, they have starches altered by malting, and enzymatic attack used phytoliths of cereals, of rhodium, of barley, etc. Another one, Abrigo de Carlos Álvarez, also in the inner lands. Same chronology. Starch granules, tritica, wet, affected by enzymatic attack, cereal phytoliths, silica skeletons of wet, beer. Another one, La Calzadilla, phytoliths of festucoid cereals, silica skeletons of barley, again barley, starch granules of wet, affected by enzymatic attack, cerotic acid. Beer with honey, mead, beeswax applied as a sealant. So this is an example, but we have 20 maybe. We are on the right way. This is the right way that have to develop archaeologists here and everywhere in Europe. You want to understand the way of the beer. But it's symptomatic that during the third millennium, there are beer everywhere. And not only beer, beer with narcotics, for example. We are still in this world of, of religious transformation or religious use of beers. This is a cave close to my home also, Cova del Calvari, where they find a barley beer with belladonna, that is strong, yosamine is a nightshade in English, interpreted as an hallucination beer that was consumed during the mortuary practices. Okay, you have a stronger one. This is from the Bronze Age, also from Andorra. You know, Andorra is a teeny country between France and Spain. People speak Catalan. Another beer with mushrooms in fern fronds, 8 seeds of gypsum with Datura stramonium. You know what is stramonium? Stramonium kills you. If you don't make your good calcul, you will die. Okay, but if you consume only a minimum part of this stramonium, you will see gods and all of this. Okay, so we keep on during the third millennium having beer for the dead, beer for the religious ceremonies. This means that all beer is devoted to this. We don't know. Maybe still we have beer for celebrations, still, and not for normal consumption, but it's difficult to say. What happens if we go to the first millennium in Iberia, and there you will find a change. We have a lot of sites also analyzed, and you will find a change. I have explained you now. We have beer for the dead, beer for the rituals. We don't know what happens in the third millennium because all this data in Spain are from tombs and are from sanctuaries and all of this. During the first millennium, we know that beer is consumed by everybody, at least until the arrival of the Romans. We have a lot of documentation. We have written documentation of beers consumed in the Iberian Peninsula. By Pliny the Elder, for example, the Caelia is the beer that people consume in the center of the Iberian Peninsula. And, the Western nations also have their own intoxicants made of grain macerated in water. There are a number of ways to do it in the different provinces of Galles and Hispania, and under different names, although the principle is the same. The Hispanic provinces have taught us that these drinks can age. I don't know how they age these drinks, but this is what explained Pliny the Elder. Egypt also has similar grains, beverages, and drunkenness is present in all parts of the world because such juices are taken pure without tempering and diluting, and is done as is done with wine. This is the concept of barbarian beverages or not barbarian beverages for Romans. Romans drink wine and they mix with water. Drinking wine not mixed with water is not good sin also. Okay? It's a concept, it's a Roman concept. But the most interesting text is this one. Paulus Orosius, maybe a man that was born in my town, in Tarragona also. Paulus Orosius is a Christian writer that is talking about the siege of Numancia. Numancia is a Celtic town, a pre-Roman town in the center of Spain, that has a history similar to that one in Israel, to Masada. The Romans put on siege the town, and people celebrate suicide, commit suicide. Everybody. Here is archaeologically demonstrated, not is the same for Israel. Okay? And in this siege, what Paulus talks, all of the people of Numancia, suddenly came out through 2 doors after having drunk a large quantity, not of wine, because in that place it is not produced. This is 130 BC, excuse me, 2nd century. Indeed, with fire, they fatten the size of the wet grain. This is malting. It's a description of malting, maybe. Then turn it into flour, mix it with a sweet juice. The fermentation gets a product with a rot taste that produces the head of drunkenness. Well, animated after a long time of hunger of this drink, they surrender to the fight. They go out of the walls and kill Romans. Okay? But texts are texts. What gives us archaeology for the first millennium? Well, we have beers, like this beer in Catalonia of the 11th century, that was the oldest beer in Spain 15 years ago. So you can notice how the research goes. And it was a beer that was a study that had emmer, common wheat, barley, and millet, and other residues like honey, etc., etc. This beer was the oldest beer 15 years ago in Spain and was recreated by San Miguel. You know San Miguel? San Miguel is one beer. It's not it's a beer of Spain that have paid the excavation and have recreated the beer. We have, for the 6th century, more documentation, like this in Tossal Montañes II, in the inner lands also. I won't bore you with data, but with barley beers again. And the Iberians, who are the Iberians? The Iberians are the people who live in the coast of nowadays Spain, from Andalusia to France. That are a lot of different peoples with a lot of different political forms, are not unified, but are known as Iberians, and they are brewers. They are already in contact with wine, because wine arrives here with the Phoenicians at 800, maybe. And they are in contact with wine, but they keep on brewing. We have also some texts like this one that, for example, Athenaeus talks about a text of Polybius and says that he has known a man that has a luxury table on his house that is similar to the tables of the Iberian kings, of the kings of the Iberian, because he is using silverware, Greek silverware, to drink beer, not wine. He can drink wine, but he drinks beer, but in a Mediterranean way, with silverware from the Phoenicians, from the Greeks. And in archaeology, what we have for the Iberians are wine amphoras, beer amphoras, with oxalate again, and this kind of vases. That when I showed this vase to Las Marius, he told me, oh, we have things in Russia in the same way. This vase with a tap on top, okay? That is not born and is interpreted as a beer vase, a beer, some kind of pottery used for fermentation. And it's decorated, sorry, and this implies that you can put this on the fire, okay? But maybe for a mashing or for a fermentation, adding hot water or something like this. We have a lot of bases of this in Iberian sites, so until the arrival of the Romans, they are a brewing society. They know wine, but they don't produce a lot of wine until maybe 400 BC. And they keep on producing beer at home for own consumption. But if we have amphoras of beer, we can talk about local trade. We can talk about local trade also. And when the Romans arrived, this finished. Stop. They implant economy based on vineyards, on extensive vineyards, and everybody drank wine. Poor people and rich people, everybody. Until the 19th century, when arrived to Barcelona, Dam, Moritz, and all the Alsatians, that began again the industry of beer in my country. So for ending, we have had, it's an hour, a long journey from the Middle East, from 13,000 years ago to the Romans in the Mediterranean. We have talked about genetics, and we have talked about these voids. We have nothing in Italy and almost nothing in Greece. Greece, Mediterranean, always thinking about wine. The first idea we have with Greeks, and also in the Bronze Age, in the Greeks of the Bronze Age, is wine. Okay? No, they have wine. But, for example, in Minoan Crete, that is a Bronze Age society, or in Mycenaean society, in the continent, they have, for example, this kind of vases where we have wastings of mixes of wine and beer in a mixed fermentation, this kind of bases. And in Cyprus, for example, we have, for a chronology that is immersed in the wine era, that is 1500 BC, we have malting stations, brewery with a malting station in a time that nobody doubts that Cyprus is immersed in a wine society. Why? They like beer because, and we return to the beginning, in this brewery, we find this kind of vases. This is not a vase devoted to the daily drink. We return to ritual. We return to religion. These communities preserved until the arrival of the Roman in Spain and in Italy, and the implantation of the wine fashion in Greece. Maybe the beer as a religious concept. Okay, yeah, I don't know if I explain what I want. Okay, so as a conclusion, here you have of what we have talked. Cereals and plants are processed, foodly speaking, at least from 100,000 before present. The presence of starches in analytics indicated that people process germinated or malted grains and grasses to preserve or to transform in maybe in alcoholic beverages. We can talk from proto-agriculture from 23,000 years ago in Ohalo 2. The first cereal beer can be dated 13,000 BC in Raquefet. Ritual, this is important again, ritual, political, and consumption of fermented alcohol should be taken in account in all of these researches. The earliest beer in Europe is in Catalonia, Can Sadurní, 4,300. Genetic studies in Neolithic context may help to determine the spread of beer along Europe with the spread of agriculture. Bell Baker cultures consume beer, possibly as a ritual manner, also psychotropic beers, as seen before. Iberian Peninsula is one of the more active areas of beer production in Southern Europe, from 400,000 4,300 to 200 BC. During the Greek Bronze Age, there are beers in Minoan, Mycenaean, and Cypriot context. And we must determine in future studies how the process of brewing is implanted in Europe, not only in the Mediterranean. And it's a long work. It's a very long work that we are trying to begin. Tusen tack. Is there any question? If there's any question?
Will the presentation be available?
Yes, yes, I can, yes, yes, yes. Yes, I can send by mail or to Las Marios or to you if you want. Yes, yes, of course. The, what? The mean? No. Meal. Yes, meat or meat. No, meat is meat at the end. It's not beer. It's a fermentation of honey. We understand a beer is a fermentation of grain. So what we understand for beer is our beers, or a sake, for example, is you are fermenting grain. Meat is a fermentation of honey, so it's meat. And wine is a fermentation of fruit. It's another kind of fermentation, so it's meat. And they have meat also. I don't know.
Has cider and fruits fermentation in Spain?
Yes.
So how is that?
We don't have cider by now in Spain. We have fruits fermentation. We have mixed fermentation of honey or meats and beer and meats and fruits. But not cider by now.
Cider is a French and English tradition, right?
Maybe. Gold. It's more modern. We don't know. If you look nowadays Spain, where is cider? In Basque country, that is close country. And in the north of Spain, where you have the possibility of growing apples. So maybe it's more modern, but we have fermentations of fruits. They ferment, I don't know how it's in English, madroño, hostia. I don't know. It's a kind of fruit that has alcohol, if you taste, and they ferment this, for example, in the beer of Can Sadurní, and they ferment blackberries or all kind of these fruits. And as far as I know, in other parts of Mediterranean, they ferment figs. For example, in Cyprus, they ferment figs and they put on beer. We have meats, we have meat with vinegar. We have a lot of fermentation there. Yeah. They search for alcohol. It's logical. From the prehistory, the very, very prehistory, if the monkeys get drunk, you can see the monkeys drunk because they eat fruit, fermented fruit. It's very easy to think about, well, I see honey, this honey is with water and I can drink this, or I can do the same that like the monkeys or like the elephants. And but this is speculation. But what is true is that people tends when he arrived and people conquer something, some territory. They try, one of the first things they do is searching what to drink. Or what I have to plan to drink here. That happened in America with the Spanish and with the English people. That they arrive and the first thing is I have to plan here to drink wine or beer or what you have. Because the Romans, they are not beer drinkers, and they implant an economy based on vineyard, an extensive vineyard and wine. Okay? It's not about I don't like beer or I like beer. It's because the wine is what gives money, and the implantation of an extensive agriculture of vine gives a lot of incomes to the Romans, and they forced to implant this. And it's where I work in the Siberian sites close to my home in the River Ebro region. It's you see that in less than 50 years, they forced people to abandon these homes and then these villages, go to the towns, new towns and the Roman cities, and transforms all the fields in parcellated fields for planting vine and other things. Beer disappears, like disappears the Iberian language and all of this. Romans.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Interesting. That was very good for me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's all. Yeah.